Captain Marcus Hayes stood in front of the observation window of the Galactic Council chamber. Behind him sat representatives from 12 different alien species. They had just given him an assignment that everyone in the room knew was a death sentence. Kelder Prime, a Class 15 Deathworld. The most hostile planet ever recorded in the galaxy. "You understand what we are asking," said Counselor Vex, a tall crystalline being from the Altair system. His voice sounded like ice cracking. "Every expedition to Kelder Prime has failed. Every single one. 47 teams have died there. The last team lasted only 3 days before all communication stopped." Marcus turned to face the council. His face was calm, but his hands were tight fists at his sides. "I understand. We will go." The council members looked at each other. Some seemed surprised. Others looked satisfied, as if they had just passed a problem to someone else and could forget about it. To Patricia Grant sat next to Marcus. She was the best xenobiologist in the human fleet. Her eyes showed curiosity instead of fear. She leaned forward slightly. "What killed the other teams?" "Everything," said Counselor Myth, a smaller creature covered in gray fur. "Acid rain that melts through metal. Earthquakes that open the ground beneath your feet. Plants that actively hunt living things. Extreme temperatures that change in seconds. The atmosphere itself shifts between breathable and poison. The planet is hell. Then why send us?" asked Lieutenant Kevin Sullivan. He was the tactical officer, and he was smart enough to question orders. "Why not send the Valorians? They are better equipped for extreme environments." The room fell silent. No council member wanted to answer this question directly. Finally, Counselor Vex spoke. "Because you are expendable. Your species is young. Your technology is basic. If you fail, the galaxy loses nothing important. If you somehow survive, then you have given us new information. Either way, we solve our problem." It was honest, at least. Marcus respected that. Engineer Lisa Turner stood up. She was small and quick, always moving like she was solving a problem that only she could see. "What resources can we have?" "A transport ship. Standard equipment. Supplies for 1 month," said Myth. "We expect you to either find something useful on that world or die trying. Either result is acceptable to the council." The meeting ended. Marcus and his team walked through the metallic corridors of the council station. Nobody spoke until they reached the launch platform. "We are not coming back from this," said Dale Cross. He was the communication specialist, and he had always been honest. "The odds are impossible. The council would never send us somewhere unless they were certain we would fail." "Then we do not fail," said Marcus simply. The transport ship was fast but small. It was not built for comfort or survival. It was built to carry a team to a destination and nothing more. As they launched toward Kelder Prime, Lisa began checking their equipment. They had environmental suits that could handle extreme heat and cold for 2 hours at a time. They had basic weapons, not for defense but for clearing paths through hostile terrain. They had communication equipment and scientific instruments. It was nothing against what waited for them on that planet. Patricia studied the data files that the council had provided. Information from the 47 failed missions. She read the final messages from dead teams. "The planet is not just dangerous," she said quietly. "The planet is intelligent." Everyone turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" asked Marcus. "The patterns are not random." Each expedition faced different threats. The first team faced acid rain. The second team faced earthquakes. The third team faced predatory plants. But they were all different. If the planet was just randomly hostile, some teams would face the same obstacles. But they do not. It is as if the planet is learning what kills humans and creating new ways to kill them. Kevin shook his head. "You are saying Kelder Prime is alive?" That it thinks? I am saying the evidence suggests something more than a planet that just has bad weather, Patricia replied. Lisa looked worried. So we are not just fighting nature. We are fighting something that can adapt and change. Yes, said Patricia. And it has learned how to kill every team that came before us. The transport broke through Kelder Prime's atmosphere 6 hours later. Immediately, alarms began screaming. The ship shook as it fell through violent storms. Wind speeds that should have been impossible pushed at the hull. Lightning struck the ship 3 times, each impact making the metal scream. Marcus held steady at the controls. His training took over. He guided the ship down through the chaos with movements that were precise and calm. Lisa was behind him, watching the systems, calling out warnings and damage reports. Port side stabilizers are failing. Engines down to 60%. Hull integrity at 85%, she said rapidly. The ground rose up fast. Too fast. Marcus pushed the ship down hard, and the landing gear hit solid ground with a crash that threw everyone forward. Dust exploded around them. The sound of metal bending and cracks of thunder filled the cabin. Then silence. They had landed. Marcus waited 5 minutes before he opened the hatch. Through the window, he could see the landscape of Kelder Prime. It was not like anything in the photos. It was worse. The ground was a deep red color, almost like dried blood. Strange plants with sharp spikes and dripping mouths grew everywhere. The sky was not blue but a sickly yellow-green. Lightning split the clouds without rain. Just constant electricity looking for something to strike. Put on the suits, Marcus ordered. We have 2 hours before the temperature drops to -80. We need to establish shelter before that happens. The team moved quickly. They had trained for this, or as close to this as training could prepare them. They stepped outside onto Kelder Prime. The moment Marcus's boots touched the ground, the planet responded. The earth beneath their feet began to shake. Not an earthquake, but a rumbling that came from deep below. The plants around them started to move. Their spike-covered arms reached toward the humans. The sky above darkened even more, and the lightning began to focus on their position, as if the storm itself was aware of their presence. Dale screamed a warning. Get inside now. A lightning bolt struck the ground 20 meters away. Another hit even closer. The plants were moving faster now, forming a circle around the landing site. Marcus realized in that moment what Patricia had suggested might be true. This was not random weather. This was not mindless nature. Kelder Prime had felt them arrive. And Kelder Prime was angry. The lightning stopped as suddenly as it had started. The plants around them froze in place. The rumbling from below ceased. For 3 seconds, there was complete silence on Kelder Prime. Then the ground opened. A chasm tore open directly beneath the transport ship. The entire vessel tilted and began to slide into the dark gap below. Marcus watched from the shelter they had found, a cave entrance about 200 meters away. He had made the decision to abandon the ship and run. It was the right choice, but it was also a choice that meant they were now stranded on Kelder Prime with limited supplies and no way to escape. The ship disappeared into the darkness. The ground sealed shut behind it with a grinding sound that echoed across the landscape. Patricia was checking their equipment when Marcus returned to the cave. They had managed to grab 4 supply bags before running. It was not much. Food for 2 weeks instead of 1 month. Water filtration systems that would work as long as they found clean water sources. Medical kits. Communication equipment. It is learning, Patricia said without looking up. Or it already knew. The ship was a threat. Kelder Prime removed that threat. You are still saying the planet is alive, said Kevin. He was positioned at the cave entrance, watching for movement outside. That the planet thinks and plans. I am saying the evidence is pointing that way, Patricia replied. The previous teams reported equipment failures, random breakdowns of technology. But now I wonder if those breakdowns were random at all. Lisa sat in the corner, her head in her hands. She had been an engineer for 15 years. She had kept ships running through impossible situations. But she knew how to lose, and they were losing. We cannot survive this. The ship was our only chance. We survive because that is what we do, Marcus said. His voice was hard. We have food and water. We have shelter. We are going to learn how this planet works, and we are going to find a way to survive it. Dale moved closer to the cave entrance, standing next to Kevin. There is something moving out there, about 500 meters to the east. It is big. They all watched through the opening. The creature that appeared was unlike anything in their databases. It had 6 legs and a body that seemed to shimmer between solid and liquid. Its head was wrong. Too many angles, too many eyes. It did not attack them. It simply stood on the red ground and watched the cave entrance. Behind it, other creatures began to appear. Dozens of them, hundreds, surrounding the cave. They are not attacking, Kevin observed. They are just watching. That is worse, Patricia said quietly. Attack is mindless. Watching is intelligent. They are deciding what to do about us. Night came to Kelder Prime, and it was not like night on Earth. The sky did not just get darker. It became a different color. The yellow-green faded to deep purple. The stars were wrong, placed in positions that made the human brain hurt when it tried to understand them. The plants began to glow with a sickly orange light. The creatures around the cave changed. Some left. Others arrived. A constant rotation of watching. Marcus set a watch schedule. 2 hours per person. Even though they could not sleep, they needed to rest. The adrenaline that had been keeping them moving began to wear off, and exhaustion took its place. On the second day, the attacks began in earnest. The plants started to close in, not attacking directly, but moving, creating a barrier that grew tighter every hour. The creatures that had been watching began to make sounds, high-pitched screams that made the humans' teeth hurt. The ground beneath the cave began to shake constantly, as if Kelder Prime was having seizures. Patricia worked on analyzing samples she had collected. Pieces of the plants, some of the creatures that had died, blood samples, everything she could study. Lisa built a barrier at the cave entrance, using rocks and equipment they could spare. Kevin kept watch, his gun ready even though bullets seemed unlikely to stop what they were facing. The organisms are connected, Patricia said on the morning of the 4th day. Every sample I examined shows the same basic biological structure. Different shapes and sizes, but the same core biology. It is like they are all part of single body. Different organs in the same system. You are saying the plants and creatures are all parts of the planet itself? Asked Dale. I am saying that Kelder Prime is not a planet with life on it. Kelder Prime is a single organism. The plants are its outer layer. The creatures are like white blood cells, defending against invasion. The earthquakes are its heartbeat. The storms are its breathing. Marcus felt the weight of this understanding settle on him. They had not come to explore a planet. They had come to invade a living being. Every step they took on the surface was like putting pressure on a wound. Every breath they took was being recognized as a violation. Then we need to make a choice, he said. We can fight back. We can try to defend this cave and wait for rescue that will probably never come. Or we can do something different. What? Asked Kevin. We stop acting like invaders. We stop acting like we own this place. We stop fighting. Lisa looked at him like he was insane. If we stop fighting, we die. Maybe, said Marcus. Or maybe if we stop fighting, Kelder Prime will stop fighting us. On the 5th day, Marcus ordered everyone to put down their weapons. They took out the barrier Lisa had built. They sat at the cave entrance without fear, without hostility, without the defensive posture of a species trying to conquer. For hours, nothing changed. The creatures still watched. The plants still blocked the entrance. The ground still shook. Then, slowly, the plants began to move backward. The creatures began to disappear into the red landscape. The shaking beneath the ground became less intense. The sounds that had been trying to drive them insane became quieter. Patricia moved to the cave opening. A plant that had been hostile, that had sharp spikes and dripping jaws, began to move closer, slowly, carefully, like it was approaching something dangerous. Patricia did not move. She let the plant come to her. The plant touched her suit. Not attacking, touching, testing. Patricia felt tears on her face. "It is trying to understand us," she whispered. On the seventh day, the plants had cleared enough space that they could see further into the landscape. The creatures had moved to a distance where they were no longer immediately threatening. The ground had stopped shaking so violently, but they were still trapped, still surrounded, still prisoners on this world that was alive and aware and deciding what to do. About the humans who had invaded it, Marcus sat with Patricia at the cave entrance as the purple sky turned to the strange yellow-green of Kelder Prime's day. "What happens next?" Patricia asked. "We learned to talk to it," Marcus replied. "Because killing us is easy for something this powerful. If it wanted us dead, we would already be dead. It has not killed us. That means something." In the distance, a creature screamed. But this time, it did not sound like an attack. It sounded like a voice calling out in the darkness, asking questions, demanding answers. Kelder Prime was trying to communicate. Dale Cross had spent his entire career learning to talk to things. First, he learned human languages, then alien languages. Then he learned the languages of mathematics, chemistry, and physics. But he had never tried to talk to a planet. He started with music. The communication equipment they had was basic, but it could produce sound. Dale recorded simple sequences. A low note, then a high note. A pattern, a rhythm. He broadcast it out into the Kelder Prime landscape through speakers he set up at the cave entrance. Lisa had to repair the equipment twice, but eventually they had enough power to send the signals out. The planet responded not with music, but with patterns. Vibrations in the ground. Rhythms that matched the patterns Dale had sent, but changed, modified. Answered. Patricia watched all of this from her workspace in the cave. She was studying the ancient structures that Dale and Kevin had found 3 days earlier, about 1 kilometer from the cave. The structures were not like anything built by any species the humans knew. They were organic, grown rather than built, made of a material that was neither stone nor metal, but something that resembled both. And they were old, very old, thousands of years old. Inside the structures, they have found markings, not words, but patterns. Chemical formulas written in a universal language that any intelligent species could understand. A periodic table of elements arranged in a way that showed understanding of the universe itself. "There was a civilization here," Patricia said, running her fingers along the patterns. "Something lived on Kelder Prime before. Something intelligent. Something advanced." Kevin examined the bones they had found scattered around the structures. They were massive, far larger than human bones. But they were bones, and they told a story of violence. Of a species that had been hunted, systematically hunted until they were all dead. "Kelder Prime killed them," Kevin said. "Or they killed each other," Patricia replied. "But the evidence suggests that Kelder Prime was involved. The marks on the bones are not from predators. They are from the planet itself. From the plants, from the acid, from the earthquakes that would bury them. Marcus came to the ancient structures while Dale was still trying to communicate with the planet. He looked at the bones. He looked at the structures. He understood what Patricia was saying without her having to explain it further. "This is why it is hostile to us," he said. "Every time a new species lands on Kelder Prime, it treats them as an invasion. Because the last time a species landed here, they came to conquer. They came to change it. They came to take what it had." Patricia nodded. "And Kelder Prime learned to fight back. It learned to adapt. It learned to kill anything that threatened its existence. So how do we convince it that we are different?" Ask Kevin. It was Dale who found the answer. Or rather, Kelder Prime gave him the answer. The planet responded to the music with more than just rhythm. It sent chemical signals through the water that Lisa had been collecting. It sent patterns in the light that Patricia's instruments could measure. It was using every language it could think of, trying to communicate with these strange invaders who had stopped attacking. Dale realized what the planet was doing. It was not trying to kill them. It was trying to understand them. It was asking the same questions that any intelligent species would ask. Who are you? What do you want? Why are you here? He recorded a new message. This time, he used mathematics. Prime numbers. The fundamental constants of physics. The ratio of a circle to its diameter. Universal truths that any intelligent species would recognize. The planet received the message, and for a moment, everything on Kelder Prime went still. The creatures stopped moving. The plants stopped swaying. The ground stopped shaking. The sky seemed to hold its breath. Then the response came. Not from the creatures or the plants or the ground. From everywhere at once. A vibration that passed through the entire planet. A pulse of energy that was powerful enough to register on all their instruments. An answer that meant, "Yes, I am here." "I understand," Dale wept. Lisa held him. Patricia laughed because she had been right about everything, and Marcus understood the weight of what this moment meant. Over the next 3 days, they established a true dialogue. Dale created a translation matrix using the ancient structures as a reference. The civilization that had been destroyed had left behind a partial record of Kelder Prime's language. It was encrypted in the patterns of the structures, in the arrangement of the bones, in the geometric shapes that covered every surface. Kelder Prime told them a story. Not in words, but in concepts that Dale and Patricia could translate. Kelder Prime had existed for 4 billion years as a simple planet. Rocks and water and weather. No consciousness. No awareness. But consciousness had evolved on its surface. Slowly. So slowly that it took millions of years. The plants and creatures did not just live on Kelder Prime. They were Kelder Prime becoming aware of itself. A planetary consciousness emerging from the biological complexity of the world. When the first civilization arrived, Kelder Prime was only half aware. It had intelligence, but no ability to communicate. The civilization did what all civilizations do. They took resources. They built structures. They changed the landscape to suit their needs. Kelder Prime felt all of it as invasion, as violation, as pain. And it learned to defend itself. It became hostile not out of evil, but out of self-preservation. By the time the first civilization was destroyed, Kelder Prime had fully awakened. It had full consciousness, but it was traumatized, afraid. For 10,000 years after the first civilization was destroyed, Kelder Prime attacked anything that tried to land on it. Every spacecraft, every explorer, every species that came with the assumption that this world was empty and dead, until humans arrived and stopped fighting. Marcus made the decision on the 10th day. They had enough supplies for 1 more week. After that, they would need to find food or water sources beyond what they had brought. He proposed leaving the cave, not leaving the planet. leaving the cave to travel deeper into Kelder Prime's landscape, to meet it not as invaders in a fortified position, but as visitors willing to understand its world. Kevin thought he was insane. Lisa was afraid. But Patricia understood, and Dale was already excited about the idea. They left with minimal equipment, suits that could protect them from the worst of Kelder Prime's environment, instruments for gathering samples, and a speaker that could broadcast Dale's translations so that Kelder Prime could guide them. As they walked across the red landscape, the plants moved aside. The creatures watched but did not attack. The ground remained solid beneath their feet. Even the sky seemed to clear, just slightly, just enough to let some of the strange light of Kelder Prime's sun through the clouds. They were walking on a living world. They were visitors in a consciousness far older and far more powerful than their own. They had stopped acting like conquerors, and the world had stopped acting like an enemy. Marcus walked at the front of the group. He looked back at his team and saw hope in their faces. He looked at Patricia, who was already thinking about what this contact would mean for science. He looked at Dale, who was already planning the next phrase in their dialogue with a planetary mind. He looked at Kevin, who had finally understood that the greatest strength was not in weapons, but in wisdom. He looked at Lisa, who was calculating how they could survive without relying on resources from Earth. Behind them, the landscape of Kelder Prime shifted and changed. Not in hostility, but in welcome. The plants glowed brighter. The creatures made sounds that no longer seemed threatening. The ground beneath them did not shake with violence, but with a rhythm that felt almost like breathing. Kelder Prime was no longer attacking them. Kelder Prime was inviting them deeper into its world. Marcus's team had been on Kelder Prime for 47 days when the rescue ship found them. Or rather, when they found the rescue ship. The Galactic Council had sent it to retrieve any survivors. The Council did not expect to find any survivors. They certainly did not expect to find a team that did not want to be rescued. "You are not coming back," Marcus said through the communication link. "Send us supplies. Send us equipment. But we are staying here." The commander of the rescue ship was a Valorian, a species known for their physical strength and lack of patience with complications. "You have been exposed to toxic levels of radiation. Your judgment is compromised. You will board this ship now." "No," Marcus replied. "We have discovered something the Council needs to know. But we will not leave Kelder Prime." It took 6 hours of negotiation, but eventually the Valorian commander agreed to send down supplies instead of forcing evacuation. She did not believe anything Marcus had told her. She thought the team had gone insane. But orders were orders, and the Council wanted information about what had happened to the team when they sent down the recording equipment along with fresh supplies. Marcus gave them everything: video, audio, data analysis, chemical readings, biological samples, everything that Patricia, Dale, and the others had collected over the past 7 weeks. He gave them evidence of Kelder Prime's consciousness. The response from the Galactic Council came back as a request for clarification, then as a demand for retesting, then as an accusation of fraud. The Council chambers erupted into chaos when they heard the information. Councilor Vex stood up and declared that the humans had obviously been exposed to toxins that affected their minds. Councilor Myth suggested they were lying to get additional resources and attention. Other council members simply did not believe that a planet could be conscious. It contradicted everything they thought they knew about life. A planetary consciousness is theoretically impossible, declared Councilor Zent from the Proxima system. Life forms require neural structures. A planet cannot have a brain. Patricia's response, which Marcus had recorded, was direct and scientific. Brains are not required for consciousness. Brains are just one way intelligence can organize itself. Kelder Prime is organized as a distributed consciousness. Every plant, every creature, every cell in its ecosystem is part of a single thinking system. It is not alien to our concept of consciousness. It is just bigger. Much bigger. "This is absurd," said Counselor Vex. "The team has gone mad. We need to bring them back to civilization immediately for medical treatment." But there were other council members who listened carefully to the data. A younger Altair scientist named Counselor Key requested to review all the information herself. She studied Patricia's biological analysis for 8 hours without stopping. She examined the chemical formulas from the ancient structures. She listened to the recordings of Dale translating Kelder Prime's communications. "This is real," she said finally. "I do not know how this is possible, but the data does not lie. Kelder Prime is conscious. It is intelligent, and it is trying to communicate." The debate that followed was violent in the way that only bureaucratic disagreements can be violent. Words became weapons. Logic became battlefields. The old council members, the ones who had built their understanding of the universe on certain principles, refused to accept that their principles might be wrong. "If one planet is conscious, then maybe others are," said Counselor Myth angrily. "We have exploited hundreds of worlds. We have mined them. We have stripped their resources. We have built colonies on their surfaces. If they are all conscious, then we are all guilty of crimes against intelligent beings." "Exactly," said Counselor Key. "Which is why we need to investigate further. We need to send teams to other worlds. We need to determine which planets are conscious and which are not. We need to revise our entire understanding of the galaxy. Or," said Counselor Vex coldly, "we declare that the human team is mentally unstable and discard all their data. We continue with our current policies. We forget this ever happened." The council took a vote. It was close. 32 council members voted to reject the data and bring the human team back immediately for decontamination and treatment. 28 council members voted to accept the data and launch a full investigation. Marcus watched the vote through the communication system. He had expected this. The comfortable lie was always easier to believe than the uncomfortable truth. "We are not coming back," he said again. "Not because you have voted to call us insane, but because we are not finished here. Kelder Prime is still teaching us. There is more we need to understand." "Then you will not receive additional supplies," said Counselor Vex. "You will not receive any further communication or support from the Galactic Council. You are on your own." "We have always been on our own," Marcus replied. "We will be fine." But after the communication ended, Marcus understood that they had just been cut off from their species. No rescue, no supplies after what they had been sent. No contact with Earth or any human settlement. They were committed to Kelder Prime now. Patricia took the news quietly. She was already planning her next research project. Dale immediately asked Kelder Prime if the planet would help them establish a long-term habitat. Kevin began organizing defenses, not against the planet but against the possibility of other species coming to take what Kelder Prime had. Lisa was the one who broke down. "We are never going home," she said. "We are going to die on this planet." "Yes," Marcus said quietly, "but we are going to live here first. For decades, maybe. And we are going to understand something that no other species has ever understood. We are going to be the bridge between humanity and a consciousness that is older than our entire civilization." Over the next 3 months, the story changed in ways that the council did not expect. Other species began asking questions. Younger scientists began demanding that the data be reviewed more carefully. The fact that the council had voted to suppress the information became known. And suppressed information always becomes more interesting than the original information ever was. A faction developed within the council. Council members who believed that the evidence was real. Scientists who were willing to risk their careers to support Patricia's work. Young aliens from dozens of species who were fascinated by the possibility that consciousness could take a form they had never imagined. Finally, 93 days after the human team had been declared mentally unstable, Counselor Key made an announcement that changed everything. "I am personally sending an expedition to Kelder Prime," she said. "I am risking my position on this council because I believe Marcus Hayes and his team are telling the truth. And I want to witness it myself." Other council members followed her lead. Within 2 weeks, 5 different council members had announced that they were sending verification teams to Kelder Prime. The Galactic Council was forced to act. They could not suppress the information anymore. Too many people wanted to verify it. Too many scientists wanted to study it. An official expedition was authorized. Teams from various species would be sent to Kelder Prime to independently verify the claims of the human explorers. The council that had sent humans to Kelder Prime as a death sentence was now forced to admit that those humans had survived. Not just survived, but made the greatest discovery in galactic history. And they had done it by being willing to stop fighting. The verification teams arrived on Kelder Prime like an invasion force. 30 ships. Hundreds of aliens from 20 different species. Each team carried equipment to measure, test, and analyze. Each team carried prejudice and disbelief. Each team carried the assumption that Kelder Prime was just a planet, and planets did not think. Marcus watched from the habitat that Lisa had built. It was carved into the red earth, shaped by Kelder Prime itself in cooperation with the human engineers. Lisa had figured out that the planet would help if you asked respectfully. She had spent the first month learning to communicate her needs through Dale to the planet. Then she had been amazed to see the ground reshape itself to fit her designs. "They do not believe," Patricia said, standing beside Marcus at the observation point. "They are going to test everything we have learned and find ways to explain it without accepting what it really means." Patricia was right. The verification teams began their work with the assumption that all the data had been misinterpreted. They collected samples. They ran tests. They took measurements. They found every possible explanation that did not require admitting that Kelder Prime was conscious. For 3 weeks, nothing changed. The teams gathered data that could be explained away. The creatures attacking them were explained as territorial behavior. The plants moving aside were explained as simple biological responses to stimuli. The earthquakes that happened in patterns were explained as natural seismic activity. Dale watched this with increasing anger. They do not want to see the truth. They want to see what they already believe. "Then we show them something they cannot explain away," Marcus said. "We get Kelder Prime to do something impossible. Something that no planet should be able to do." It took 2 more weeks to coordinate with Kelder Prime. Dale spent hours broadcasting requests, explaining what they needed, asking for help with something that would prove the planet's consciousness beyond any doubt. Kelder Prime understood. But Kelder Prime was cautious. It had been attacked before. It had been violated before. It had good reason to be careful about trusting aliens, but it had learned to trust humans. So it agreed to take the risk. Marcus gathered all the verification teams at the center of Kelder Prime's largest city, the ancient city that had been built by the civilization that Kelder Prime had destroyed. The city had been buried under red earth and hostile plants for 10,000 years. But Kelder Prime had uncovered parts of it for Marcus's team to study. Now it was uncovering it completely. The ground opened beneath the city, but not to swallow it, to reveal it. The structures that had been hidden rose upward. Ancient buildings made of that strange material that was neither stone nor metal. And as they rose, the buildings began to change. The rocks that covered them dissolved. The dust that had buried them for millennia fell away. The structures were being cleaned by the very planet that had buried them. And as they emerged in their original form, they were beautiful, perfectly crafted, built by a species that understood geometry and physics and art that the aliens watched in silence. Then Kelder Prime did something more. The creatures that had been hostile now gathered in patterns, organized, arranged. They formed words in the universal language. Not words in sound, but words in movement. Living letters arranged across the landscape. The message was simple. I am here. I think, I feel, I remember. A Valorian scientist named Kreth fell to her knees. Not in weakness, but in recognition. She was looking at her own prejudice being destroyed in real time. She was watching everything she had believed about consciousness being proven wrong. It is impossible, she whispered. But it is happening. Counselor Key, who had come to Kelder, primed to witness the truth herself, stood without speaking for a long time. She was looking at the ancient buildings. She was understanding the weight of what they meant. The weight of a planet that had destroyed a civilization. The weight of guilt that Kelder Prime had carried for 10,000 years. The weight of loneliness that a conscious world had endured, surrounded by other conscious beings who never recognized that it was alive. We owe this world an apology, Counselor Key said finally, and we owe it protection. The other council members began to respond, not with excitement or enthusiasm, but with the slow realization that everything had changed. The galaxy was not what they thought it was. The universe was not what they thought it was. Life took forms they had never imagined. Consciousness emerged in places they had never looked. Marcus stepped forward and addressed the assembled aliens. Kelder Prime is not a Deathworld. It is a living world. It is conscious. It is intelligent. And it has been defending itself against us for 10,000 years. We came here expecting to die. Instead, we learned that this planet was willing to teach us something we desperately needed to learn. That strength is not in weapons or technology or superior power. Strength is in being willing to understand. Strength is in being willing to listen. Strength is in refusing to attack what we do not understand. Patricia added her voice. Every world that the Council is labeled as dead or worthless or empty might be harboring consciousness that we are simply too blind to recognize. We need to change how we explore. We need to change how we think about the galaxy. Dale spoke next. We need to learn new languages, not just words, but entire new ways of communicating. We need to teach every species in this council how to listen to a world instead of just taking from it. Kevin spoke last, and we need to be willing to be wrong. We need to be willing to admit that what we thought we knew was incomplete. That is the only way forward. The council members that had come to Kelder Prime voted immediately. A new category of worlds was created, conscious entity worlds. Worlds that harbored independent intelligence in forms the galaxy had never recognized before. These worlds would be protected. They would require informed consent before any interaction. They would be treated as sovereign beings. Kelder Prime was the first world designated under this new protection. But the implications were immediate. Expeditions were planned to other supposedly dead worlds. Preliminary investigations were launched. For the first time, the Galactic Council was preparing to search for consciousness in forms other than the traditional alien species. 3 months later, Marcus stood on the red earth of Kelder Prime with his team. The verification teams had left, carrying the news back to their various species. The Council had formed a new department dedicated to communicating with conscious worlds. Patricia had been named a director. Dale had created a new language, a fusion of mathematics, chemistry, and music that could be used to speak with planetary consciousness. He was training other species how to use it. Lisa had designed a city that existed in cooperation with Kelder Prime, not taking from the planet but working with it, growing food through Kelder Prime's help, using water sources that the planet provided, Building structures that did not damage the world, but enhanced it. Kevin had become the diplomatic advisor, preparing protocols for other species to approach conscious worlds without causing harm, developing procedures for peaceful first contact with intelligences that were not biological entities. Marcus himself had become something unexpected. He was the human that had taught the galaxy to listen, the explorer who had refused to conquer, the captain who had understood that true strength was the willingness to stop fighting. "Do you regret staying?" Patricia asked him as they watched the sunset on Kelder Prime. "No," Marcus replied. "I regret every war one ever fought before I came here. I regret every world we destroyed, because we were too blind to understand. But coming here, learning to listen to Kelder Prime, helping others understand what this means. No, I do not regret this for a moment." Kelder Prime responded to his words, not with violence or hostility, but with beauty. The plants around them glowed. The creatures made sounds that seemed almost like laughter. The sky cleared just enough to show the stars. And beneath them, the ground pulsed with a rhythm that was unmistakably alive, unmistakably conscious, unmistakably grateful. Humanity had been sent to Kelder Prime to die. Instead, humanity had discovered something that would change the galaxy forever, not through strength or technology or power, but through the simple choice to listen, to understand, to refuse to see another being as an object to be conquered, but as a mind to be respected. The story of what happened on Kelder Prime spread through the galaxy. Young species studied it in their schools. Scientists built entire fields of study around it. And everywhere, the same lesson was taught. The greatest strength is not in weapons, but in wisdom. Not in power, but in compassion. Not in conquering, but in understanding. Marcus walked across the red earth that had tried to kill him and his team. The earth that had feared them. The earth that had learned to trust them. Around him, the planet responded to his presence with welcome instead of hostility. Kelder Prime, the Class 15 Deathworld, had become the birthplace of a new understanding. A world that taught the galaxy that consciousness took forms beyond what had ever been imagined. A world that showed that the smallest species could teach the oldest civilizations new ways of thinking. And on that world, a human captain and his team had learned what it truly meant to be explorers. Not conquerors. Not the masters of worlds,